When we decided to launch the plasma design class as a part of the scientific glassblowing technology at Salem Community College, we had just the right kind of mix of students. We had so much talent and ambition. So we decided to build a manifold ourselves and build our whole plasma cart and sort of like imagine together like how we want plasma to work within this institution. And luckily, the school was so generous with us about really letting us build the plasma cart of our dreams. And the students really just did an amazing job.
Hello, disclaimer here. There's something I have to tell you before we can begin. The information provided by Taming Lightning is designed to provide helpful information and to educate on the subjects discussed. That being said, the information provided is true and complete to the best of our knowledge and is not intended to be used without professional guidance or supervision. All recommendations are made in good faith by both Taming Lightning and affiliates, to which we disclaim any liability in connection to the use of the information we provide. Thus, we ask that you be informed, be curious, and to ask questions. Let's get to it.
Neon lights, I'm baffled. Pick it apart like samples. Give me all I can handle. Light me up like a candle. I'm taming lightning. Percy got that lightning. Plasma in my veins. Glass ring in my life.
Welcome back and welcome to the Taming Lightning podcast. I'm Percy Eccles II, your host for Taming Lightning, as well as the independent plasma tech at the Pittsburgh Glass Center, where I'm researching and developing a space for exploring plasma and neon light art. This is a process requiring the technical and artistic expressions of glass blowing with the alchemical and scientific application of electrified gases and specialized equipment that you would also find used in neon. Self-study in this field has led me to a growing network of experts and institutions that allow for conversations with artists, makers, and experts related to plasma, neon, glass, and beyond. Through these conversations, I hope to expand our understanding of plasma and neon light, looking beyond its associations with novelty and sign-making, and to explore the potential for noble gases as an artistic medium, and of course, have fun making and sharing what I learn along the way. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Glass Art Society. Since 1971, the Glass Art Society has been using the joy of glass to connect, inspire, and empower all facets of the global glass community. From the early days of the American Studio Glass movement to the upcoming United Nations International Year of Glass, GAS continues to foster connections across generations, disciplines, and borders. Join them in celebrating 50 years of Glass Art Society as they present the 2022 GAS Conference in Tacoma, Washington, USA, from May 18th through the 21st. With the theme, Between Here and There, this milestone conference will explore the past 50 years of glass and what the next 50 years holds for making, collecting, and educating. Visit glassart.org today to learn more and register. And for those both interested in and working with illuminated glass, be it neon, plasma, or otherwise, I'm here to inform you that the Plasma Art Alliance will be hosting a plasma pop-up social during the 2022 Glass Art Society Conference. Updates will be found on Taming Lightning blog, and more details will be released as we get closer to the conference. Hello, Lightning Tamers. This is episode number 45. In today's podcast, I'll be joined by Amy Lemaire. Now, the reason why I want to talk with Amy has been manyfold. I see my journey within hers, the multiple disciplines and curiosities, to her involvement with pioneering plasma at Urban Glass, and her current development of plasma education at the Salem Community College Glass Program, where she is surrounded by skilled and educated students and faculty, in which she dives into plasma illumination from an emphasis on research within the arts. Amy Lemaire is a multidisciplinary artist and educator based in Brooklyn, New York. An explorer at heart, her work reveals an interest in currency systems, material language poetics, and the production of histories. Lemaire studied at the School of Art Institute of Chicago for her BFA and Pratt Institute for her MFA. She has taught at Urban Glass in New York, Pilchuck Glass School in Washington, Penland School of Crafts in North Carolina, and Salem Community College in New Jersey. As a visiting artist and instructor, Lemaire has worked with students at Pratt Institute, NYU, Tyler School of Art, Alfred University, and University of Montana. Recent residencies include Tyler School of Art, Urban Glass, Museum of Art and Design, Wheaton Arts, and the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Her essay, Flame Grows Up, was published in Glass Quarterly magazine in 2018. She is an artistic member of the American Scientific Glassblower Society and a member of the Glass Arts Society. Lemaire has exhibited in galleries across the U.S., including Traver Gallery at Seattle, and is currently represented by Heller Gallery in New York City. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Amy Lemaire. We've got quite a bit to talk about today. Mostly I'm introducing you to our audience here so they know what you're about and the multitudes that you bring to the table here, and to talk specifically on plasma design. So it's been a while. We kind of been in conversation through email or through social media, whether it's sharing links or commenting or whatever it may be. And in another timeline, we would have met earlier, but we can cross our fingers for this coming summer where we'll both be teaching at the Pittsburgh Glass Center during the summer. So I'm excited to hear about that. Welcome.
Thanks, Percy. Thank you so much. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I'm just thrilled to be asked to be a guest. So it's great to finally connect with you, and thanks so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. So for our audience here, I understand your work and who you are as an artist first, and the way that you approach your artwork and your process is through many different mediums, and it's just central to just whatever the idea is, you are connecting those different things. Can you kind of explain to us what your work is about and what mediums you use?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, I consider myself to be a multidisciplinary artist, and all of my work emanates from concept first, and then I'll choose a medium that's in the service of the concept. And so a lot of times recently that has led me to glass as a material to think through and as a plastic material to sculpt with that holds my ideas well, but it's definitely not limited to that. And I have a more traditional art education background in all different kinds of art, in contemporary art. And I started as a painter, working two-dimensional, and that's something that I still do. So yeah, my practice really encompasses a lot of different types of making, and the ideas that kind of link it all together have to do with currency, ideas about currency and value and meaning, and how meaning is made, and thinking about those ideas in a lot of different modalities.
Now, what's the difference between currency and value in when you use those terms?
So when I think of value, I think of like the idea of something being potentially more important than something else, or something holding either, in a lot of cases for me, it's an object or an idea, something holding content.
Okay.
So that's sort of like how I use that word. Mm-hmm. And then with currency, I think of more as a way that value can get shared or pass between people.
Okay.
So, for example, history is a form of currency. Language is a form of currency, because it's one thing to embody a form, let's say a form with value, and then it's another to have somebody else agree with you on that value, and that creates currency. So there's a social aspect to that for me, and that's something that I'm really interested in as an artist and as a person.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking about those terms, and I was like, the way I was initially thinking was that value is it high or low? Like switching between high and low in currency was about a numerical value. That's how I was kind of, but you make a very clear point with there's that social agreement on the numerical of, and also matching numerical with the high and low value of an exchange. So that makes a lot more sense if I'm getting that correctly, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, and I think of value not in strictly terms of, say, like monetary value, but the reason why I work with these ideas is because there are other instances in my life and in the world that that I see value, and I want to bring, like, for example, like sharing emotional content. You know, you share a personal story with me, I'm impacted by that. There's value there. It isn't necessarily a monetary value, but there's a transaction happening of value. And so how do we make space in our lives for those type of ideas and give just as much value to those types of transactions as you would say a monetary situation where there's that type of trade involved? And so for me, it's almost a way of like calling more attention to the human experience and giving value, giving something significant to the human experience, so that you can't just reduce everything to like a monetary value, you know? Like, so for me, that's what that exercise is. And through my own practice, I've done some like through my art practice, I've done some exercises like creating my own currency that through glass beads and putting those beads into circulation. And I get to determine how I use those, you know, how I transact with those. And I get to have a say in what the value is. And so for me, that's very much related to kind of, I want to choose what I give value to in my life, you know. And so making my own currency allows me to be able to do that. And it's also a reminder that all currencies are a negotiation in value, and you and I have to agree on a value in order for there to be a transaction, right? And you know, take the dollar, for example. That's something that's always fluctuating in value in relation to other currencies around the world. You know, we tend to think of it, I think, a lot of times as sort of like a standard or like a steady marker, like numerical marker, like you're saying. But in actuality, it's always fluctuating. And so my exercise of making my own currency and circulating that is a reminder for myself that, you know, every transaction is a chance to negotiate a value. And both parties have a say in that.
And there's like a little bit of a like a historical, even cultural context to creating beads and trading that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I do use glass a lot in my work. And the way I found glass as a sculptural material is through glass bead making. And those forms, bead forms, have a major presence in my work for many decades at this point. So that's a form that I always go back to. I find a lot of meaning in, and I feel like I view glass beads or beads in general as a unit of cultural worth. You know, and they can be public yet private. There's something that is, when a bead is passed from person to person, regardless of language or cultural background, there's this sort of inherent understanding of that there is meaning. There is some value embodied in that object, just because they're so widely used by all humans around the world, you know. And so there's something about that form that's really powerful to me and holds value automatically, or is maybe formatted for cultural value of all types. And so that's a form that I'm really interested in, and it just seems very accessible. And I feel like I've learned so much by trading those objects with all different types of people, because they enable me to transact with almost anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's really what I'm interested in doing, is having these conversations about currency and value and meaning. So
My brain automatically wants to go on to so many more tangents on that. How, bead works because it can be strung on a string, which means it could be easier to be carried. That's a theory. Maybe that's improvement. I don't know. It's something I've read about who knows when. But it's just fascinating. So your introduction into glass came through from working with doing bead making.
yes.
Then from there, where did you get introduced to bead making? Was that in a college or a public studio? How did that come about?
So I went to, I have a traditional art school education, or as my friend Sharon O'Mara puts it, an American semiotic art school education. I love that term. And I went to School of the Art Institute of Chicago for my undergrad and Pratt Institute for my graduate degree, both in painting and drawing contemporary art. So that's where my academic background is.
Mm-hmm.
And my practice is very much rooted in the history of painting and drawing, and that's sort of where I root my practice.
Mm-hmm.
But early on, when it was in 1997, so I was about a year into my my college education, I had the opportunity to go to Oxbow, which is a retreat associated with School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a short bead making class there from Cindy Jenkins.
Oh.
And who is responsible for the popularity of the hothead torch. And kind of what was at the time, I caught her on one of her teaching tours where she was going around the country and kind of seeding these ideas about like the portability of the hothead torch. And she had a book and kind of this whole this whole idea that like you could just make beads at home and make jewelry or make a business or whatever you want to do, teach. And which I've done all those things, but I was very inspired by her and left the workshop with a torch and with her book and just kind of never looked back,
Amazing.
Never stopped. So it's just grown from there. And I started teaching almost immediately because I was in Chicago and a lot of my my friends and my colleagues at the time in school, were artists. And so, so everything I learned, I would just teach the people around me. And I started teaching formally very soon after that in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm also an alumni of SAIC in terms of Oxbow.
Great.
I met, Jerry Catania, rest in peace. He was my first contact for taking a workshop in glass, first time ever, Oxbow. And throughout, up until his passing, he's been a great contact and mentor in terms of just connecting me with the community and whatnot. So Oxbow is one of my favorite places to teach and learn at. And I hope to go back and teach a plasma class someday and leave a little memorial piece for Jerry, because he wanted to see that. He never got a chance to live long enough to see that. So.
Oh, excellent. I hope you get the chance to do that. That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So glass making started with the bead making for me, and I'm still a bead maker. I think I will always be a bead maker at the core. It's just so rooted in my practice at this point. And there's so many other ideas and practices that stem from that at this point, and education. Really rooted in that form of the bead. And it's just been so good to me, like working with that bead form for my whole career. It's something I don't think that one lifetime is enough to study bead forms, and so it's just like there's always more to learn, and more to make and more to explore. So I think I'm not tired of it, and I'm almost 25 years in, and here I am in addition to a whole bunch of other things. Now my glass making skill has exponentially improved. And so now I'm able to, fabricate pretty much anything I can think of, which I wasn't able to do at the beginning of my glass career. So yeah, so I'm able to realize ideas in a different way now. I'm not limited in my ability. So that's great to kind of gain that freedom.
And you expanded into more hollow shapes as well. Is that a transition that came along when you shifted into borosilicate, or did you end up doing some of that with some of the soft glass for bead making?
Yeah, so the way it happened for me is, so alongside the bead making, I was also predominantly an image maker, exploring like painting, more traditional painting, like with painting and drawing for the early part of my career. And so the bead making kind of came alongside that at the same time. And after grad school, so about 10 years ago, is when the shift really started happening for me with the glass. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I, at that point, had been working with glass for long enough that, like a little over a decade, that I finally was, you know, my relationship with the material had changed and had matured to where it was more functional. I could do a lot more with it. And I could think through the material rather than just focusing on how to manipulate it in a certain way, like you do when you first learn a material. So my relationship really changed with glass. And for me, where that went was I've always had these big ideas about what I wanted to do with glass as a plastic material for sculpture. And really, what I wanted to do was make paintings out of glass that defied picture plane. That kind of exists in three-dimensional space. And so I was able to do that, after I finished grad school, and then I kind of went full on with the glass. You know, I was in New York City, and I started, I was working at Urban Glass and working out of that studio. And that's kind of where it all started. And a whole bunch of other studios in the region after that, where these explorations started, of trying to increase scale. And then also bring the abstract language that I was working with my painting and drawing into kind of three-dimensional space. And it started solid with bead making glass, like with the same materials, the rods, and just using kilns to manipulate the glass, kilns and torches, kind of like using just what I had available in my studio. But using the kiln almost like somebody would use a glory hole. Like, heating the glass up and then taking it out, manipulating it and putting it back in. So not really traditionally what you would use a kiln for, but again, it was kind of like, this is what I had to use. What could I do with these tools? And what could I create with that? And so it started hollow. And then not too long after that, I started working at Salem Community College. And that's really where I really fell in love with borosilicate and started understanding what the sculptural possibilities were there. And so, and that's where I really started focusing on hollow forms and kind of gained a lot of skill and put in a lot of practice time and started making work that was hollow. And that's grown into the practice that I have now that includes both hollow and, I work with a whole bunch of different forms at this point. So it really exploded. But that's really like working, when I started hanging around at Salem Community College, that really totally changed the way I looked at the material in a good way, and gave me a lot of ideas about where I could go with that in contemporary art. Yeah.
From shifting into blown glass with borosilicate, at that point, when did you get introduced to perhaps neon and plasma? Did that happen shortly after sticking around Urban Glass? And where did that really begin in terms of that place?
So that happened when I was working down at Salem Community College, and somewhere around, I want to say like 2013 or 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. I was teaching in the art program. I was teaching the sculptural flameworking classes down here at school. And Salem Community College has a scientific glassblowing program, which is the oldest institutional glassblowing program in the country. Predates any studio glass. So it's a really interesting program. So I was teaching with Dennis Brining, who was the department head at the time. And he's the one who really planted the seed. We down here at at school, we have the International Flame Working Conference every year. And I've been involved on the committee for that. And anyway, we have themes every year. And one year we had a plasma theme. And so we invited Jason Chakravarty and Eric Franklin down to do a plasma demo as our featured artists for the Flame Working Conference. And so that year I was teaching sculptural flame working, and I gave an assignment to my students to make some plasma and brought it up to Brooklyn Glass and had it pumped. And then, brought it back to the students. So, because my students were so inspired by what was going on in the Flame Working Conference that, we wanted to make some plasma. So that was actually, I believe, the first time. And then, Dennis Brining, he was a huge influence, instigator, should I say, about like me getting into plasma. And his career, his scientific career involved working with cathode ray tubes. And so he has more of a functional experience with plasma and a lot of artistic ideas too about how plasma could be used in the art world. And so he really planted a lot of those seeds early on for me. So it wasn't something I was necessarily drawn to on my own, but through dialogue with him, he really lit the fire. And then I started working more, spending more time up in New York. And Dennis came up to New York and we started teaching together up there at Urban Glass. And he and I taught the first plasma class, and retrofitted our manifold up there to be outfitted for plasma. And we taught the first class together up there. So he really helped us out and helped, he's the one who taught me about plasma and lit the fire, for that. And now here I'm back at Salem Community College, now teaching in the scientific program, teaching plasma design and designing a class specifically designed to expand their scientific glass technologies program out a little bit. So it's kind of come full circle, which is really nice. And Dennis comes in as an advisor in our class, which is nice. So we're still very much in dialogue about plasma.
I mean, you've had some key influences here from the contemporaries. I think who else have you been in contact with that's allowed you to continue to grow and expand your understanding of plasma in this space?
Well, I haven't had the opportunity to take many formal classes. I'm mostly self-taught with glass kind of most of the way, but as an instructor, I've had a lot of opportunity to collaborate and to co-teach and, being around the teaching environment with a lot of other instructors, and especially working up at Urban Glass, we've had a lot of people come through. Wayne Stratman was he came through pretty early on and like dropped a whole bunch of knowledge on us, which was great. Joe Upham, he is another like kind of Boston area neon and plasma guy. And he was also around a lot when we were starting to get the plasma going up in New York, and really helpful in that capacity. And then David Ablon, he is over at Brooklyn Glass, and he's also just a huge resource in the community and just such a nice guy, very generous with his time and with his knowledge. So yeah, they've all been really helpful. And there's just so many, like you said, it's a community.
Yeah.
And I know you've come through. And and we have kind of, what happened up at Urban Glass is we kind of ended up having a little bit of a homegrown kind of plasma situation where Ashley Goodwin and Emily Craddock and I all kind of got interested in neon and plasma at the same time, and really just kind of learned together. And building the equipment and building out the classes and running through the students through those classes. And the students who are in the classes are all like fully fledged contemporary artists, And so getting to work with so many accomplished artists as an instructor is really one of the most valuable experiences that I've had, because I learned so much, not only from making my own work, but from helping students make their work. And then that took me into fabrication, just straight up making work for other artists on a professional level, which is a whole other level of learning for me.
Yeah.
So those are big parts of my journey, education and fabrication as well. So not so much of a traditional track.
Yeah. What is traditional track, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Choose your own adventure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like I'm stepping into that realm a little bit myself, where, I was introduced to plasma from Pat Collentine at Pilchuck in 2014. Then, as the very much younger self, was really just like, I'm going to change my entire BFA thesis show and do it all in plasma. And then, but it's like, made that happen through connecting with a local neon shop that was like family owned. So it was like really welcoming environment to like give this a shot. They're like, oh, you're the plasma guy that's coming in from the school. And it's like, yeah, to, getting here at the Pittsburgh Glass Center and making it happen because there happened to be 2 donations of neon equipment. So like building things and figuring out how things work and starting the podcast has really helped. And that opened me up to seeing all the things that people are doing. So, when it comes to this point, I'm super excited to see that, see what you've done and see how awesome it was to just have that manifold made by the students at Salem, and just like, yeah, it's perfect. It was like perfect because it's like you learn how to do the scientific glass blowing. You have all the stuff there. The students have the capabilities to make it happen, and boom, it's right there.
Right. So just to give a little context for the audience, last semester, the spring semester, kind of under the cover of COVID, is when we decided to launch the plasma design class as a part of the scientific glassblowing technology at Salem Community College. And we had just the right kind of mix of students. We had so much talent and ambition. And so we decided to build a manifold ourselves and build our whole plasma cart and sort of like co-create, like imagine together like how we want plasma to work within this institution. And luckily, this school was so generous with us about like really letting us build the plasma cart of our dreams. And the students really just did an amazing job. It was completely student built. We designed it together, and the students built the manifold and did like a really great paint job on the top, and even put like undercarriage lighting on it. So it's really it's the headiest manifold you'll see out there, and it just totally suits this community. Mm-hmm. The way I run classes on it is, it's the students' manifold, and so everybody pumps their own work, and it's a great teaching tool. Mm-hmm. It's a great teaching tool. And so for our students who are, they're studying to be scientific glassblowers, it's also an opportunity for them to get practical experience with working on manifold systems and doing maintenance, and then also using the manifold as well. Where they do get that elsewhere in their curriculum in chemistry, where they make an apparatus and perform, research with they perform an experiment with an apparatus they built. And this is sort of building off that idea that you can learn by doing, because people learn in all different ways. And for some people, learning by doing is the best way, And so to be able to bring that to this program is just really, really valuable, I think.
Being part of the fabrication removes that barrier that normally, if I took someone who did glass and was interested in plasma, would have a little apprehension towards working with the equipment itself, because at that point those students who have fabricated it can fix it if they break it. And so
that's the policy. But you're absolutely right. And if you go take a plasma class somewhere, I don't know what every institution's policies are, but most likely you're going to have a technician pumping your work, and manifold maintenance and building isn't necessarily going to be a part of a course. And so the fact that we have the freedom to be able to include that into the curriculum, I think is really what makes this special. And because it's a semester-long course and we have all of the resources here, I think that's something that I'm excited to see what our students do after they leave us here and go out into the world, because there's some serious talent already, and then armed with these skills and now the experience in plasma, I just think that it feels like there's a whole new crop of plasma artists that are kind of about to bloom. So I'm really excited to see what they make. Yeah.
When you think about plasma, how do you think about its use with glass?
In my own work, I can speak to my own work first. How about that?
That'll work.
Yeah, and then I'll give you another answer. So in my own work, one of the things so I just kind of started experimenting with plasma as kind of a way to understand glass better, to be honest with you. And but I didn't really start using it in any artwork until I had a pretty decent understanding of it. And the concepts that kind of lead me to want to use plasma in a sculpture have to do with this idea of the synapse. And for me, it's very related to educational spaces. And the way I see, because like that plasma filament to me kind of articulate or could symbolize a synapse, like that aha moment maybe, or like a neuron in the brain firing off and creating memory or something along those lines, right? This whole idea of the transaction of currency, like we were talking about earlier. And so for me, like plasma is so connected to education because of how I use it in an educational setting, that my work is very much about my plasma work is very much about kind of trying to make a model for a currency that could be used in education, and so and for me it's this synapse, it's this when an idea is transmitted, and so that's kind of how I use plasma in my work to kind of symbolize that. And right now I'm working on this series called Synapse actually. And and to me they're models of how ideas travel in institutions. How like there's this cross-pollination that can happen, and then there's a mirroring of ideas, and then of course there's this aha moment, this synapse that happens, especially in educational spaces, which is where I tend to make a lot of my work, because I'm not in my studio alone. I'm around with other people, and there's a lot of excitement and a lot of knowledge transactions happening. And so that's in my work. That's where plasma fits in conceptually, is to help kind of get some of those ideas that I have about transactions in education and how important those are out into the world. Yeah. And then as far as teaching goes, where plasma fits in is plasma is such a great teaching tool. There's just so many. I mean, I'm a lifelong learner, and there's just, especially now that we built the manifold and we have, I can teach the students how to use it. There's just there's so many teachable moments that I'm lucky to be able to teach plasma, and to be able to have these tools in order to have these conversations with my students and see where their ideas go.
So what would 3 of those teachable moments be?
Some of the teachable moments. Well, for example, we have at school this is something that happened last semester when we were considering how to build our manifold. We have a glass wheeler pump at Salem that was built by a team of scientific glassblowers, and it just kind of sits on a cart. It was actually the inspiration for the manifold cart that we built.
Okay.
And at first we were considering building off of it, but anyway, we decided to build a whole new one. But
Good choice.
But what was interesting about that is that we had this wheeler pump, and for one thing, I didn't know what it was. And so it started with let's unravel the mystery. What is this? And when I found out the story behind this piece of equipment, it's a diffusion pump that's made of glass. And so it's really made as a teaching tool, so that you can see the way a distillation or a diffusion pump functions. And so when we fire it up, you can see visually how it works, whereas other styles of diffusion pumps might be made out of a different material and you might not be able to see the function. And so that's really where the idea came from of I think that manifold maintenance and teaching the students how to work on the manifold should also be a part of this. And it really came from that, learning that story of the Wheeler pump, making it as a teaching tool, and why it exists in our studio, which as a teaching tool. And so
Context.
Yeah, and so that just really seemed like a good direction to go in for an institution. Yeah.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Fluxion Induction Heat by Garrett Churchill. Fluxion is a small, family-run company out of San Diego, California. They specialize in induction heating solutions for annealing brass and all manner of brazing, soldering, and heat treating. The neon version of the Annie heater is perfect for converting neon electrodes in both conventional neon tubes as well as plasma art pieces. For more information, please email Garrett Churchill at sales@fluxion.com or give them a call at 858-699-6096 or visit our website at fluxion.com. That's FLUXEON.com.
Yeah.
So when you first were conceiving of plasma design, was that was part of if I'm correct, like a visiting lecturer like series, or did you jump straight into that after the proposal for
it? The school approached me, and I was here as a visiting artist for a few days. And actually, Salem was one of the few places I could travel during COVID because of all of the travel restrictions and the safety and stuff. And so usually I travel quite a bit in my regular life. And so anyway, I found myself during the pandemic at Salem, and that's where we started having the conversations, and we started talking about this idea of me coming and teaching a plasma design course. And I've taught 2-week workshops with Ranjit Bhatnagar at Urban Glass we call it Modern Prometheus. So I've already run plasma workshops on various scales, and then also I had run a few different versions of this class that I call the projects class, which is basically just artists come in and make their artwork, and I'm tech support. I help them. We had quite a few artists who chose to use plasma in the context of that. So I have some experience with teaching plasma, and so we got to talking about it, and it just seemed the Bob Russell, who's the head of the scientific glass department here, he was interested in introducing plasma into the program as a teaching tool, and also because we have the art program, and so it seemed like a great way to kind of blend the two. We have so many creative students in the scientific program. It just seemed like a great blend of art and technology. So they invited me to come. They asked me to come and teach the class and design it, and so that's what happened. And so we're in our second semester. And it's going pretty well. Got some pretty great work coming out of the program. So I'm proud of that, proud of my students.
So when you're teaching plasma design, what's the summary description of the course? And then can you break down kind of the outline of what students will be going through in that course?
So this semester, what I'm doing is, so the objectives for the course are that we're having a dialogue about plasma in the context of scientific glass blowing, design, and contemporary art. So there's different venues where plasma goes in the world, and we want to consider all of those. And I also want the students to have a working knowledge of the processes used to create plasma. The process that we're using oven pumping method, but I want them to understand what's going on in order to get these effects in glass. And so those are, and I want them to be able to have conversations about plasma and about the science of plasma, and then also about research involving plasma, both in the scientific world, in the design world, and in the contemporary art world. And so my students all are conducting research this semester as part of their coursework as well, related to plasma on any topic related to plasma. And so that is very interesting because their presentations tend to be, diverse because everybody kind of has a different idea of what they're interested in that's related to plasma. So it's really, that's one of my favorite parts of the class is the research. And we make a place for research weekly in the course as well, for like studio research as well. So this semester, what I've been doing as far as coursework is a few different projects that are getting kind of progressively more complicated. I guess, so the first one was a capacitive piece that does not have an electrode, but it's just a glass vessel evacuated in pump with noble gas that would like capacitive in a capacitive field. And so that, and then from there, that opens up the conversation of, well, what's a capacitive field and like under what conditions is that created? And questions about electricity, and and introduces them to the pumping process. And so now we're working on a single electrode piece and introducing phosphors as well, and kind of getting a little bit more into sculpture and design. And also we've taken some tangents as well that are kind of generated by the students' individual research. And also the contextual research presentations that I give them, which are both contemporary and historical. So I'm kind of seeding that a little bit. And so we were able to, and because we work at scientific glassblowing, we're at scientific glassblowing school, we're able to bring in things like glass to metal seals, making our own electrodes and kind of like moving the plasma around within a plasma vessel by making little kind of like, I call them little lightning rods with little tungsten braided seals that we can stick to the inside, or like even like a basically like a little electrode that goes through the wall of the glass made out of tungsten. So we're using all the skills that they use anyway, that they learn anyway in the scientific glassblowing program, but it is practical application now. And so we try to keep the conversation bouncing between design language, contemporary art, and also research that's going on in the scientific community, because a lot of these students, after they leave Salem, will go to work in the industry, and they may have occasion to work with evacuated forms, cathode ray tubes, or making other type X-ray tubes, or there's all different types of applications for plasma technology. We actually had Mike Souza here from Princeton.
Awesome.
He's here today, and he's making, he's involved in making glassware for plasma research up at Princeton. And so he's here with his team this week, and they're making some large pieces for an experiment for plasma research. So that lined up right with our class today. And it was great to see that, and hear about some of the research that he participates in as a scientific glassblower and the practical application for that.
That's awesome.
That's another teachable moment with the plasma, because it's such a bridge between all of these different disciplines. And so it's really great to be able to float between those and show the students that you don't just have to have one path, you can be interested in all of those things. And it's great to have a working knowledge of all of those things, and be able to speak in design language, and be able to have a conversation with a researcher as well, and know what that language is all about, and appreciate the arts and the application of research in the arts as well.
Yeah. It's awesome. Like the first thing you kind of bring up is the capacitive coupling, or the capacitive field. There's a lot of cool stuff I learned through that as well. And there's so many different approaches to that. Even just learning about the context to like a plasma globe, the interior is coated with a conductive paint, like Aquadog E or Aquadog, it's oil based, and that's been super cool. And then I've used stuff like conductive epoxies, and found that to be another kind of tool to use. So like it's almost endless.
It really is. And a lot of my students have advanced degrees already, and in other disciplines, or engineering or whatnot, and then I have them in class, and so they're able to draw on their backgrounds and bring those ideas to plasma as well. And so, I find like my role as an educator is just to kind of plant the seeds, and then keep everybody safe but encourage everybody to kind of like really dig into their own research. And like, some of the things we've been getting into this semester is, our first project, we were making these capacitive pieces, right? And so, that begged the question right away, how are we going to power these? Because I hadn't introduced transformers yet. And obviously everyone knows of transformers and a more traditional role of plasma that would have an electrode on it and would be powered by driver. But so, I didn't answer that question right away because I thought that there could be maybe some cool solutions if, everyone were kind of just allowed to think about it and like have the freedom to like, come up with their own solutions, And so, and so what happened was, by the time we're getting to this project with the single electrode, there's this natural, like, kind of linkage with the two projects now. And it's like, oh, well, maybe I could make a piece with a single electrode to power my other piece. So the pieces start talking to each other. And then one week I made a capacitive plate out of some copper and some sheet glass and some copper foil, and just rig that up as like a base so we could use our, we use the L7020s, the Tech 22s to power our pieces. And so I rigged it up to that, and then now we have a capacitive base. So you can put your piece on there. So just like ways to augment the equipment and kind of like the big thing, thing that I want the students to learn is the logic involved, so that they can problem solve and think through a problem and not necessarily a process, but be able to come up with their own process because they understand the logic. And so that's kind of how I'm trying to formulate this class, is sort of leading them, but leaving spaces for these questions to really seed research and
deep learning.
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of like giving them the freedom to explore their own ideas and see what comes out. And and also like to have fun with it, And so the second half of the class semester is coming up, and I'm looking forward. Then we'll really dig in and get more complicated with like some of the things that we've been getting into are we just reverse engineered an Aerolux tube. And started playing around with just making kind of like metal sculptures inside of a plasma vessel and painting phosphors on and lighting them up and using kind of like these little capacitive rounds, or sorry, not capacitive, these like little tungsten rods as grounds to like push the plasma around in a shape. And so just having all those ingredients is so much that can be done. In multi-chamber, a lot of the forms in this that the students are making in their other classes, the scientific glassblowing classes, are multi-chamber, like say a condenser form, or like different. They're learning how to construct really complex glassware, and so glassware that has multi-chambers is just ripe for putting different types of gas in there, and there's just so much design potential for those forms already. So that's what we'll be getting into the second half of the semester, is like a little bit more sophistication and building on the process that we've been practicing, and just seeing how far we can push it, and applying concept to that too, so that we're making meaningful artwork.
Yeah, plasma definitely challenged you a bit. You have both the preparation, the process, and then you have to balance the interior with the exterior. When is it too much on the exterior where it doesn't really do the light justice, or when is the light too much for the form that it's contained in? It's interesting because I'm working on something where I'm making something and it may not be suitable for plasma, and I'm just going to continue doing it anyway so I can show the results so that other people can judge whether or not it works or not.
Totally. And the nice thing about plasma that I'm learning is, I don't use any mercury. I have a strictly no mercury policy, and because I really think of borosilicate as a plastic sculptural material that can be reworked and revised and edited and taken apart and put back together. That's how I view the material, and that's why I've been so drawn to borosilicate in particular lately as a sculptural material.
Mm.
So I take those attitudes to plasma, and the way that plays out is, I'll pump a piece several different times, and it's not like set in stone, and part of that is because I'm lucky enough to have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
But also just exploring the potential of borosilicate as a sculptural material and being able to work with it like that, and like, oh, here's a plasma piece, but what if I like repump that and or I combine it to this other piece or change where the electrode's placed and repump it,
Yeah.
So there's always this opportunity to like make it better.
Yeah.
And I try to take those opportunities, rather than just making a new piece. Yeah.
I've done the same thing, especially I make these clouds. I like to consider them glass potatoes, but they've gotten better and better over time. And in the last year, I've repumped 4 or 5 of the pieces several times and found that, okay, my knowledge has upgraded a bit. I can now understand how to spend more time and maybe this is going to be good, but then I don't like the way I'm going to change it. And that flexibility of borosilicate is really what I really appreciate about it. You really couldn't do so much of that with soft glass. But that's what I really appreciate about borosilicate. Though recently I've been working with using a glass solder to adhere an electrode to a furnace glass blown piece, and that gives me a bit more flexibility if I wanted to repump.
Yeah, totally. I think there's so much unexplored territory there, and plasma as a field just feels wide open to me, and I've done quite a bit of research, in the context of teaching what's out there, and I just think there's so much sculptural potential that is untapped or just starting to be tapped. And so I'm excited to be a part of that, and like you're saying, balancing the form with the fill. I just think that's a whole other, exploration that like one lifetime's not enough. I'll do what I can, but it's just like, that's where like having a community comes in, because you can all learn from each other and pass the knowledge around. It comes back to you and share it. And so I really enjoy that part, working within the community on those ideas.
Yeah. Teaching, when you're teaching this process, this medium, is it a medium? Is it a process? What is it? Plasma is plasma. Yeah. What are some things that you learned that's been very important when you're trying to introduce this?
I think that it was really important for me to understand the process from start to finish and be able to execute the process and feel confident with that, troubleshoot the whole deal. Because then I'm confident in explaining. There's a lot going on, when you're talking about like from manifold building and using vacuum systems, and then, there's the sculptural part, and then there's the electrode technology, and if you want to get into phosphors, there's so many different, and then there's the whole like driver situation and how do you choose a driver and balance the load. There's so much, there's so many, like any one of those topics could be a whole research inquiry. And so for me, it took me a few years to kind of like feel confident enough that I had a balance of knowledge in all of those areas. I'm not a master at any of it. I don't think any of us really are, But like I said, I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm interested in having an active conversation in an educational space with plasma. And so it took me a while to get enough base knowledge to be able to enter into that conversation in a meaningful way and be able to access the minds that I do want to have conversations with. And so that's kind of what I've been focusing on the last few years, is just kind of like taking it slow, and I'm just trying to understand how all of the different parts of the process fit together. And why is it important to, have an electrode that's designed in a certain way, and the development of the electrode over time evolved in a certain way? Why is that? And how did that relate to the forms that were made during those times? And that development, like just, this is historical view, but still you get the idea. It's like, I don't think that you can really consider plasma independent of all of these other kind of offshoot discussions, because they all go together. And if you look at people like Wayne Stratman, who is also like such an innovator in the field, The people who are really good at plasma also tend to be kind of inventors as well, and contribute to the intellectual property of plasma and making better drivers or electrode technology or bringing something to the field that is technical as well as artistic. And so I think just understanding that those things kind of all go together, and it's a lot of information for a base level, to prepare myself to even have this conversation in the context of education. Yeah.
It's vast.
Yeah.
It's so vast.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
the conversation is getting a lot more interesting now, because once you have that base level of knowledge, then you can build on it. It's like you kind of format it where new information comes in, And so this semester we've been, I've been working more interested in bringing in the history of cathode ray tubes and X-ray tube technology and how those evolved from early plasma tubes, Crookes tubes, Geisler tubes, and tracing the evolution of early plasma experiments to present day and all of the different tracks those have taken. And the importance of scientific glassblowers, who are the ones who actually fabricate these objects. So that's been kind of a thread that's been going through my mind this semester. We've been having a dialogue with my colleagues about that topic and trying to inform myself and learn more about the history of scientific glassblowing in order to kind of better understand how plasma technology is used in the field today. Not just in an artistic way, but in research.
Yeah, those background informations are very important because they can only enhance your picture of the process and what's involved. Like one of my bigger questions have been about electrodes in general. I talked to Robert House quite a bit about it, and he comes from the history through the neon lens, which is not quite defined when it comes to how we're doing single end electrode plasmas. And also, that's not even considering the capacitive coupling done through plasma globes. And who knows what iterations were produced beforehand, before introducing the electrode to that, before it was, its current form where it has that ball in the center. That's my next fascination. And I found there's someone here in Pittsburgh who's fascinated by plasma, that they have their own lab and everything.
Wow.
So I'm excited to jump into that dude's place and say, okay, what are you doing? Here's what I'm doing. I'm just making pretty lights.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really feel like that's, once you have a basic understanding and that's what I'm talking about, about understanding all these basic parts, and then that kind of unlocks the next level of knowledge, because you have a way, when you go and meet with this other artist, you have a place to put all of that knowledge that's coming in now, and then it really gets interesting. And I feel like that's really the front end, the front lines of plasma exploration right now is where could we go with this, artistically speaking. And I think art reflects life in a way. And so I'm really interested in what's going on in scientific research and how these plasma tubes evolved into different disciplines, because these objects are in existence in the world now, and I'm using this technology that evolved from the same point, now in my artwork. And so I want to be aware of how else plasma exists in the world, especially plasma tubes, when I use it in my artwork, because I feel like there's a relationship and I want to acknowledge that relationship. So right now I'm real interested in kind of exploring and finding out, especially from the scientific glassblowers, what kind of research is being done? What do these objects look like? What are they used for? and how did they evolve? How did the technology evolve? How are they made? And maybe that will inform what I choose to make and how I choose to use plasma as like vocabulary in my own artwork. At the end of the day, our artwork's just like talking about our experiences in the world, So, yeah. So I'm just trying to like make my world a little bit bigger so that way I can include some of these ideas in my own artwork. The other thing I really want to touch on is I think that people who are interested in plasma should definitely keep an eye on what the students coming out of Salem are making, because there's some real talent here, and not just in artistic design, but also in, like manifold building, and also potentially maybe there might be some other contributions to the plasma world as well. We've got some really knowledgeable people here at school, and the level of invention and innovation is really high. So, give it some time, but I think that there's going to be some strong contributions to the plasma world. And I'm really looking forward to everybody kind of like welcoming in next generation of plasma artists to the conversation, because I think they're going to really have a lot to contribute. So
awesome.
Keep an eye out for the new artists for sure. Yeah. And I just want to thank you so much, Percy, for making the time and the invitation. It's just been such a pleasure to geek out about plasma with you. I just appreciate you so much. And this is such a pleasure. There aren't that many people in the world who can like get this deep into it. So thank you. It's a lot of fun.
I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I feel like this could still be many episodes long. So we'll come back to it later.
If we continue next summer at Pittsburgh Glass Center, maybe we can collaborate.
That would be great.
Let's make it happen. So, yeah, let's make it happen.
Make it happen, yeah.
So.
Thank you for listening to the Taming Lightning podcast. Music credits to the following artists in order of appearance: Retro by One, Taming Lightning by Trav B. Ryan, Good to Go by One, Walking by Ras-Hop. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you, Amy Lemaire, for joining me and sharing with us your inspirations and the work you do to inspire both creative and scientific education of plasma illumination through the Salem Community College. Your approach is an evolution to the interest in plasma, and I appreciate you. I'd like to thank the Pittsburgh Glass Center for supporting me as a place of research and inspiration, the Plasma Art Alliance, where I can have an access to a well of knowledge and connects me to some amazing and supportive people, and both sponsors in this episode, the Glass Art Society and Garrett Churchill from Fluxion. If you'd like to support Taming Lightning, subscribe on the newsletter on www.taminglightning.net or follow on Instagram at Taming Lightning. Other options for support are one-time donations through Ko-fi, spelled ko-fi.com/taminglightning. Or you can join me on Patreon for additional perks and benefits. I'll have links provided in the show notes, so feel free to share, comment, and subscribe. And as always, be safe, be healthy, and be strong, and I'll see you next time.